From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
From corn to cotton.
Main holdup now is dry weather.
See what has Louisiana farmers switching things up this year. The White House mulls over a plan to try and cut the high price of diesel as poultry producers try to gain the upper hand on a deadly disease.
This virus this time is circulating through a wide population of wild birds.
How this year's bird flu differs from one of the biggest on record right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. A deadly bird flu is hitting poultry producers hard this spring. However, it hasn't been nearly as devastating as 2015's avian influenza outbreak, which USDA officials labeled the most significant animal health event in U.S. history. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us, and Michelle, the industry's learned a lot since 2015 that's really helping them combat this disease.
Absolutely, Clinton. And to date, more than 38 million birds in 35 states have been lost in this year's avian influenza outbreak. This is closing in on 2015 when USDA reported losses of 7.4 million turkeys and 43 million egg layers. But industry experts say that's where the similarity ends. In 2015, the high-path avian influenza virus was spread by lateral transmission, mostly through human contact. But Dr. Craig Rolls, president of the Iowa Poultry Association, says in 2022, the spread is much different.
This virus this time is circulating through a wide population of wild birds. And I mean, we're talking dozens and dozens of species of birds it's been identified in. And so our risk factors are slightly different.
They still aren't sure how the virus is getting into the barns, but do know it emerged earlier than in 2015 and has persisted with the cool spring. Rolls, who's also in charge of cage-free production for Versova, says that's because the virus has adapted.
Historically, avian influenza started as a low path, right, just a routine influenza, and it would get introduced into a domestic bird, and then it would mutate into high path. This particular strain of influenza started in Asia. It moved to northern Europe a couple years ago, and then it finally got to our borders just in the last year. And it's been amazing how fast it has spread across all species of birds and the flyways. It's been remarkable.
In 2015, 5% of the wild bird population carried the disease. This year, it's estimated at nearly 35%. However, due to changes made in biosecurity protocols in 2015, one of the largest egg producers in Iowa, Center Fresh, has had only minimal losses in their 20 million layer operation this year.
In 2015, we were hit severely with bird flu. We had to put down 8 million birds in our facility. So far, this go around in 2022, we've only had one of our pullet sites hit with bird flu. So it's only affected about 240,000 pullets.
Indiana turkey producer Kevin Kelb's operation was also spared this spring, unlike the last outbreak.
No issues with the bird flu this year, just thank the good Lord. I don't ever want to go through that again. That was miserable.
He says biosecurity is the main reason his operation was not infected, while flocks just 10 miles away were hit.
You know, we got lines of separation in our buildings where, you know, you come in, you'll take your clothes off there from the outside, and then yes, you're in the same room, but once you jump over to the other side of that line, we'll put different clothes on that's only been in that building. You know, we got foot baths that we use. We wash our hands, sterilize our hands.
The industry as a whole spent millions of dollars to adopt this Danish system, and Rolls says it's been a strong line of defense against a virus that is spreading quicker over time.
In the outbreaks that are occurring in this year, the epidemiologists are telling us that our efforts have really limited the transmission of virus by that route, by human transmission of virus.
Which he says has likely prevented an even bigger bird flu disaster in 2022. Tomorrow we'll look at how the rapid response from industry and government ag officials is allowing the industry to repopulate herds faster and get eggs and poultry products back into grocery stores quicker than it did 7 years ago.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Can anything be done to solve higher diesel prices right now? Prices at the pump now averaging $5.55 a gallon. That's according to AAA. That's down about 2 cents from last week's record high of $5.57. Now, we're hearing the White House is looking into possibly tapping an emergency diesel reserve to try and ease the spike in price. However, it's reported the rarely used stockpile reserve is relatively small and would only serve as a temporary solution to buy time. Tapping the reserve has only been done once before in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy back in 2012. President Biden in Japan to launch the framework for a new trade deal with 12 Indo-Pacific nations. The U.S. hasn't had a trade plan for the Indo-Pacific in years. You'll remember former President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Trans-Pacific Partnership back in 2017. That proposal could increase trade, making it easier to get goods from overseas. Now, another goal is to improve supply chains and lower prices. Congress would need to ratify the president's economic framework for it to become official. Now, some critics are already saying they'd like to see more tariff reductions in the plan. The American Farm Bureau Federation calling the framework a positive step, and it hopes progress will quickly follow. Now, the trade framework comes as trade continues between the U.S. and China, but the relationship remains turbulent. Tariffs put in place back in 2018 remain on $550 billion worth of Chinese goods. And China dramatically dropped the amount of U.S. ag products it purchased until the Phase 1 trade deal was reached between the two countries. So who won that U.S.-China trade war? Well, the Wall Street Journal taking a deeper dive, saying China fell 40% short of its total commitments under the trade deal, but there's also plenty of information that shows China was the loser because it took a bigger economic hit than the U.S., with Chinese companies facing American tariffs exporting less to the U.S. Now, in the end, the real winner may be Vietnam because it started to export goods to the U.S. that China once sold. With insurance deadlines approaching, many farmers are racing against the clock to try and get the corn crop in, and they're really starting to catch up now. Look at this. USDA reporting 72% of the corn crop is planted. That's a 23% improvement from last week, and now just 7% off the 5-year average. As for soybeans, 50% of the crop is now in the ground, 20% better than last week, and just 5% behind the 5-year average. Let's check out these snowy scenes from Colorado. The heavy snow piled up in the mountains and foothills of the state, with some areas receiving more than 20 inches. The snow so heavy it brought down tree limbs on power lines, causing power outages. And get this, meteorologist Andrew Whitmire says more snow is on the way for that area today. He joins us with an update. Andrew.
Yeah, unfortunately, after this past weekend, after parts of Colorado were digging out from a few feet of snow, more snow is in the forecast for the mountains of Colorado. Luckily, though, we're not talking feet, we're only talking a few inches, but that is on our weather watch for today. We're also watching the potential here for a few severe thunderstorms that could set up across the southern plains all the way down towards the Texas Panhandle, and high fire danger across the Four Corners as well as the Sacramento Valley. That'll be a concern as we head on into this Tuesday. Let's zoom in on that snowfall estimate for today. Notice just west of Denver, they could be waking up to some snowfall by Wednesday morning, anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of that fresh white powder. And then moving on over to our severe weather side here, again, a good chunk of central Texas is going to be under the threat here for a few stronger storms that could bubble up here as we head towards a Tuesday afternoon, right on into a Tuesday evening, as a low pressure system begins to strengthen, and that is going to head towards the heartland of the country as we head towards midweek. And just briefly touching on the Memorial weekend here for Memorial Day itself, watching a big upper level ridge building on in for the eastern half of the country. That's going to bring with it steamy hot weather. Meanwhile, a deep trough is going to build across the western states, and that's going to allow for a cooler weekend ahead. And Justin Campbell of Terre Haute, Indiana is pretty happy right now. He says his corn is off to a great start, and he says he planted it on May 11th, and it was already out of the ground, and get this, just 4 days after, on the 15th. I'll have more on your Ag Day forecast coming up.
From cattle to grains, it was an interesting start to the commodities trading week. Michelle Rook joins us once again with more. That's next. And later, cotton farmers down south are putting the finishing touches on planting season. We look at what's driving acreage decisions in Louisiana in the country. The return of wet weather to the plains, plus updated planting progress from USDA, helping to drive a mixed market on Monday. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us once again with more.
Joining us with today's market analysis is Brian Grady with Pro Farmer. Brian, Monday everything higher except for soybeans, and in the grains, with the feed grains higher and the soybean market lower, it looked like we were kind of just reversing, seeing some corrective action technically from the prior week's closes.
Absolutely. We saw the wheat market get beat up pretty good at the end of last week and finished very poorly, and it bounced back here to open up the week. So I think that's just good corrective trade. Corn market followed wheat down to a lesser degree last week and followed it to the upside to a lesser degree here today. And then the soybeans and soy meal, they were strong last week and pulled back today. So just corrective trade on Monday to kick off, and we'll see where we move from here forward through the week.
Yeah, certainly money flow has been impacting these grain markets, hasn't it?
Definitely. I think the money flow is probably as important as any fundamentals right now, just because of the fund activity and everything that's going on, not only in the outside markets, but with the inflationary front around the world and all the uncertainty that brings.
And cattle managed to close higher, kind of impressive considering the cattle on feed report. There was some bearishness in it.
Absolutely. I was very impressed with the cattle market today. You look at the placements number in that cattle on feed report, and it easily topped expectations. It was down a little bit from a year ago, but well above what the top end of the trade range was. So to see the type of gains that we saw today in the cattle market, we did gap lower on the open because of that report, but that was the low of the day, and we ended up with bullish reversals in some of those contracts. So impressive price action there.
Thanks so much for your analysis. Brian Grady with Pro Farmer.
It's time to sign up for the 2022 United Pork Americas Conference in Orlando, Florida. Register today at unitedporkamericas.com and join us September 7th through the 9th.
Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire joining us. And Andrew, we've been kind of watching some of the fires out west. For sure, it looks like that New Mexico Four Corners region going to get hit again.
Yeah, unfortunately, and this is not only going to be the case today, it's going to continue right then into Wednesday and perhaps Thursday as well. In parts of Northern California, they're also under the threat for today for some high fire danger. And yeah, as we zoom on in at this fire weather concerns for today, you can see Albuquerque, El Paso, all in the threat here for high fire danger. And again, this is going to spread across the Four Corners as well as the Sacramento Valley as well, dealing with the potential here for some high fire danger for today. In fact, it's going to be really hot today in the Sacramento Valley with some highs getting up well into the 90s. So again, do be very, very cautious of anything that could spark anything outdoors. And as we go throughout the precipitation for this week, notice the areas where we have that high fire danger. It's going to be almost a completely dry week. Unfortunately, the bulk of the moisture is once again going to be centered across the far southern plains and across the south and east as far as that the heavier rainfall is concerned. In fact, check out some parts of the Roanoke Valley. They could be looking at some rainfall amounts over 2, maybe even 3 inches, all dependent on where some showers and thunderstorms decides to set up. And this could also be the case as well across the eastern half of Tennessee. Looking at our severe weather threat for Tuesday, anywhere from Dallas down towards San Antonio. And then as we head towards Wednesday, we're going to see this working eastward towards the Texas Panhandle coastline, as well as up towards the central portions of Indiana. It could even be under the threat for some stronger storms as we head right on into Wednesday. And it's really all thanks to this low pressure system. We had high pressure to start off this week, and that's going to continue to exit off to the east. And meanwhile, all eyes on this low pressure system. That's going to continue to bring with it warmer temperatures, as well as the chance there for some scattered showers and thunderstorms as we go throughout the mid portion of this week. And then all eyes on this upper level ridge. That's going to continue to build on in here as we round out this week. In fact, it's going to be a toasty one heading our way towards the Memorial holiday weekend with that heat building in. Downright hot potentially for parts of the eastern coast as we get right on into the holiday weekend. And our AgDay select towns for today: Monroe City, increasing clouds, chance of an overnight shower. Going to Royal, chance of a few showers. And going to Cottonwood, California, high fire danger Look at that high temperature today, 95 degrees.
Cattle continue to pour into feedlots. We have the latest cattle on feed numbers coming up next. And later, it's not corn but cotton grabbing acres in Louisiana. A check on planting progress in the country.
The Dairy Report on Ag Day is brought to you by Beringer Ingelheim, because cattle first is a remark only made remarkable by you, producers and veterinarians across the country.
The latest Cattle on Feed report offers up some surprises for both beef and dairy producers. USDA putting cattle and calves on feed at 12 million head. That's 2% higher than May of last year. It's also the highest May 1st inventory on record. Now, the market had expected a 1.3% year-over-year drop. Feedlot placements totaled 1.81 million head, down just under 1% from 2021. But market watchers had expected them to fall 4.6%. Also released last week, the livestock slaughter report, which shows more than 237,000 head of dairy cattle were slaughtered in April. That's more than 59,000 head fewer than March.
I think are, in essence, holding on to cattle right now because of the good milk prices that they're seeing and the potential that's out there for good milk prices. But yet, from this other standpoint, we didn't see that reflected in the milk production report that came out earlier in the week for the same month.
An update on a story we've been following for a while now about a New Mexico dairy producer forced to euthanize thousands of cows due to PFAS contamination. The Environment Department of the state of New Mexico saying it's helping fourth-generation dairy producer Art Skopp. He's the owner of Highland Dairy in Clovis. Now, we visited him back in 2016 when business was great, but in 2018 he was forced to dump 15,000 gallons of milk each day and let 40 employees go. That's because 7 of his 13 wells were contaminated by toxins called PFAS. The chemicals entered the groundwater at nearby Cannon Air Force Base. They're commonly used in fire retardant foam. Skopp was ultimately forced to euthanize more than 3,600 cows, his entire herd. The estimated loss of revenue, along with expenses, totaling more than $5 million. Now, the state says that doesn't account for the upcoming costs from an on-farm composting of the animals, along with final disposal. The state's Environment Cabinet Secretary putting the blame on the Department of Defense, saying rather than taking responsibility for the pollution, it put a family farm out of business and is forcing the people of New Mexico to pay for the cleanup. Now, he says they are helping Skopp manage the cow carcasses as hazardous waste. Well, there may be some rain headed to the Delta. Good news as cotton planting nears the home stretch in Louisiana. We have an update next. Cotton planting picking up steam right now. USDA reporting 57% of the crop is now planted, a 17% increase over the last week, and now 3% above the 5-year average. Louisiana is 95% done. In Louisiana, cotton planting is nearly complete. As Craig Gautreaux reports, the state's expected to nearly double its acreage this year because of good cotton prices and the high cost of nitrogen fertilizer. That has some farmers switching acres from corn to cotton.
Louisiana cotton farmers are just about ready to wrap up planting this year's crop. Cotton acreage is expected to increase to nearly 200,000 acres, which is well above last year's 110,000 acres. Wet weather a year ago had cotton planting well behind schedule, but this year has seen a complete reversal.
The main holdup now is dry weather. Some guys are in need of a rain to finish planting. Some are planting cotton a little deeper than usual, chasing moisture.
Not only is acreage rising, but the price for cotton has been surging. The increase in cotton acreage has led to a smaller corn crop in the state.
Prices are looking good. Cotton has lower fertilizer input compared to the corn. High fertilizer prices are driving that increased acreage as well.
Foster is testing 41 different cotton varieties on 4 research stations across the state. He is doing similar research on 10 farms. The results of his tests provide farmers with information to make informed decisions.
It has experimental lines in it as well as commercial lines, and a lot of growers look at this data to make variety selection.
The price of seed is a major expense to farmers. The price reflects the research and development that goes into making today's modern seeds.
Technology, herbicide tolerance, insect tolerance, and I'm afraid it's going to increase in the future with newer technology being added to the arsenal.
It takes approximately 120 days for cotton to go from seed planting to being ready to harvest. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gotro reporting.
All right, thanks, Craig. And that's all the time we have this morning. Thanks for watching. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day out in Farm Country.